Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of 3 Wide. I'm your host, Radney Crawford, and today we're going to be looking back on the inaugural Chicago Street Course race where Shane Van Gisbergen won in his first career NASCAR start. Also, we'll discuss what seemed to be a hotter topic than the race itself, and that is comments being made by NASCAR Spotter Brett Griffin and the reaction to those comments. So let's get started. So before we get started on this week's episode, let me tell you about our presenting sponsor, Hunt to Harvest. If you're looking to get an upgrade or update on your hunting apparel, then hunttoharvest.com is where you need to go. Well, right now you can go check out their spring 2023 collection where they have numerous shirt designs for both turkey hunters as well as fishing. Also, they have a sale going on right now with their long sleeve shirts. So if you're wanting to get a head start on your winter collection, hunttoharvest.com has it all ready for you. And they still have that mystery box special going on where you can get 3 shirts chosen at random sent to you for just $33. Be sure when you go to checkout to use that promo code RADNEY18923. That's RADNEY18923 for even more savings at checkout at hunttoharvest.com. So starting out with looking at Sunday's race at the Chicago Street Course, as I said, Shane Van Gisbergen gets his first career win in his first career NASCAR start in any series. And Shane, he was dominant all weekend. He was very strong in practice and qualifying, so it really wasn't that much of an upset. He was driving the 91 car for Trackhouse Racing in their Project 91 car, and he becomes the first driver to get a win in his first career start since Johnny Rutherford back in 1963 at Daytona. And this was the perfect storm for this to happen. You look at the track itself. This is the first time any of these drivers have been on this track, as well as the wet conditions. It really puts Shane on the same level as these NASCAR Cup Series regulars, and Shane is a superstar over in the Supercar Championship Series. He has 80 wins, 3 championships, and when you put him in such a strong car as a Trackhouse Racing had prepared in that 91 car, he was going to be a guy to contend with, and he was fast all weekend in practice and qualifying. It definitely wasn't an upset win by any means. Also, with the field being flipped after NASCAR makes the call to go from lap 100 to lap 75, some drivers have already pitted where a lot of the leaders hadn't, and that got most of them stuck in the back. Shane was able to stay near the front and work his way through traffic and come away with the race win with an impressive short battle against Justin Haley. And with this street course, it was much more successful than I thought it would be. Saturday looked like it was going to be a questionable weekend with the weather, with the way fans and NASCAR team members were kicked out of the park after the weather kicked in, and then the Xfinity race being called on Sunday, just a few laps from being halfway, which I don't have a problem with, but it was just really turning into a messy situation, along with the rain and really the track and the pit road becoming flooded. But ultimately, everything was able to get dried out enough where they can start the Cup race, and you had a ton of new fans out there that seemed to be enjoying this experience. Really what was cool for me was seeing fans like in their apartments, maybe not even NASCAR fans, but people in their apartments over the track looking out their windows, watching what was going on. Really good exposure for the sport this weekend. Now, whether we go back next year or not, that still remains to be seen. This is supposed to be a 3-race deal with the Chicago Street Course, but the new mayor, he's kind of wishy-washy on things. He's not really ready to commit on another Chicago Street Course race, which would be a shame, but it gives NASCAR an opportunity to maybe take this thing on the road, start putting, street courses in a couple random cities and hope it works just as well as it did this past weekend at Chicago. Now, diving into what I believe was the bigger topic over the race weekend was comments made by NASCAR spotter Brett Griffin on social media, and at times he was trending on Twitter even during the race, which I felt really took away from how awesome the race itself was. But Brett had made comments, especially over the past couple of weeks and this past week and race weekend, about the city of Chicago, about the dangers of it, how, the crime statistics of it, mainly going on about the city government, the government that runs it. But a lot of people were talking over the race weekend about how Brett was crapping over the entire event, which I believe is completely false. Again, you look through his tweets, it's mainly the city government he's got a problem with. It's mainly the leadership, not so much the event or the fact that NASCAR was on a street course. And the only tweets I could really find that he sent out about the race or the track itself was he had sent out a day or so before the Cup race on Sunday how he didn't foresee much too wide racing and didn't know where they were going to be able to pass, which is a valid, point because this is a street course, our first time at this type of track. We don't know what's going to happen. And then later he sends out a tweet with the battle between Shane Van Gisbergen and Justin Haley, how if Shane gets around Justin Haley, basically he's team Justin and hope Justin punts him out of the way and goes on to get the win. And a lot of people lost their minds over that, saying how disrespectful it was. Shane had been driving clean all day. It's just a idiotic take, so on and so forth. But Brett didn't say nothing that none of us haven't said at some point, whether it be while watching the race on TV to our friends or whoever we're watching the race with, or on social media. Brett is an employee of Colleague Racing. He's a part-time spotter. He's had a long relationship with that team and with Justin Haley. He has a vested interest there. He wants Justin to get that win to lock himself and Colleague Racing into the playoffs. So I get that he's a member of the sport, a member of a team, but it's that thought of, hey, knock this guy out of the way and go get the race win. That's something all of us are guilty of saying at some point in our lives watching this racing. So the blowback to me, it wasn't so much about speaking ill of the track, of the race, of the racing series. This was all political. And I'm not going to sit here and dive into the politics of everything. This is a NASCAR channel. I'm not diving off into that world. But so just trying to stay on the surface, Brett, again, had valid points in his concerns, talking about the crime in Chicago, the gun violence, the leadership, and liberal run cities was his big axe to grind. He let it be known he's not a fan of liberal run cities. These are his tweets. You can go back and look at them. And fans were wanting to point out, well, St. Louis, Missouri is more dangerous. Daytona Beach is a dangerous place to be at. Myrtle Beach, which Brett is from South Carolina, he talks about how he loves vacationing in at Myrtle Beach, how that's a violent place. Those are valid points as well for those that were making those arguments. St. Louis is ranked the #1 most dangerous city in the United States. And Brett also made a correct point that it's the same with any major city. There's areas that are bad you don't want to go to. There's crime in all these major cities, and you do your best to avoid them. So Brett wasn't running away from that point that there were more dangerous cities or that there were other dangerous places than Chicago. If anything, he embraced and said, you're exactly right. You're proving my point right. But just looking at a minute, Brett's comments about the Chicago crime and then those people comparing it to these other cities, my takeaway from Brett's comments were, it's different at Chicago with this street course because you are racing in the heart of Chicago. You're in the city. You're not in this secluded, protected area of a racetrack kind of outside the city limits. You know, and it's a lot of unknowns with this being the first time there. What are the logistics? Where are the teams going to have to go to stay? What are they going to have to put up with? What about the fans, their comings and goings? Are they going to, what's their exposure going to be to some sort of violent crime? Whereas at Gateway, again, St. Louis, ranked #1 on the most dangerous U.S. city in the country. Gateway, you are across the Mississippi River and 5 miles away from downtown St. Louis. You're in your little protected area where, for the most part, if anyone's out of that track, is to enjoy the race or tailgate, take in the festivities. Same can be said with Daytona. Daytona International Superspeedway is about 3 miles from downtown Daytona and across the Halifax River and 5 miles from the beach. And I was actually at Daytona just earlier this year. I stayed just across from the racetrack, look outside my window, and there's the front stretch grandstands. And you're still in a good area right in there. You're not in a rough part of Daytona. Now, if you go down the street a little bit to downtown Daytona, you do see a lot more. You see a lot more homelessness. You see more drug activity on the streets at downtown Daytona. And then when you cross over the bridge and get into Daytona Beach, it's pretty similar to the same. So to me, the comments by Brett on the dangers of Chicago is mainly on the location. If we had been racing at Chicagoland Speedway, this would have not been a big talking point. Brett wouldn't have been sending out what he did about the city of Chicago itself. Then on Door Bumper Clear, the most recent episode that came out just a couple days ago, Brett makes comments about, enjoying the Navy Pier up in Chicago, and he's enjoyed going to Wrigley Field. He even mentions on social media over the weekend he had been to a couple concerts at Wrigley Field. He's just not a fan of the city, the way it's run, and the high rate of crime that is up there. And you immediately had people coming out saying he's being hypocritical. He's backtracking on his comments after how awesome the race was. I see that as complete nonsense. To me, that equates ranting about how bad the safety is in the next gen car this past season, or ranting about how terrible the road course racing is and how awful the short track racing is, going off about that, but then talking about how awesome Sunday's race was on this street course, which is in essence a road course. Two things can be true at once. Brett can sit there and say how terrible the city of Chicago is being run, but he enjoys certain aspects of it. Just like many of the people that went after Brett and calling him out, they can rant about how terrible the next gen car is and how terrible road course racing is, but how awesome Sunday's race was. Two things can be true at once. It doesn't make you a hypocrite. And to finish things off with this topic, I think people went out of their way with showing how offended they were by Brett's comments, or even going out of their way to try and be offended and act offended by Brett's comments. And in doing that, with retweeting Brett's stuff and putting your own quote in there, or sharing the video from the most recent episode of Door Bumper Clear where Brett's making some comments and calling him out on it, all you're doing is really giving him more exposure than he probably ever has on social media. You're just really helping him out and getting his name out there. And in my opinion, you're taking away from the race that happened when you're tweeting about the race, or you're tweeting about what's going on, and you're trying to make little digs at him in your tweets by mentioning him by name, or calling him a certain name, or, as I said, quote tweeting him. You're taking away from what was going on the track. When I'm sitting there trying to scroll through Twitter, see what the latest update is from Jeff Gluck or Bob Pockrass, and I'm seeing tweets from fans, and all it is talking about Brett Griffin and the comments he made and how wrong he is, how stupid he is, so on and so forth. You're really stooping yourself down to the level you believe him to be on, and you're not helping your case. So the best practice I've found to learn is, if you see something you don't like, keep scrolling. If you keep seeing it and you get tired of it, unfollow, block. We know Brett's good at blocking that, and that's another conversation, but sometimes doing stuff like that, just get it off your timeline. Be done with it. Move on and tell people your side of it, why you enjoyed it, not for the sake of going after someone else, but for you trying to improve your content or improve the sport that you're tweeting about. And that'll wrap up this week's video. As always, thank y'all for joining me and watching along. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button to our channel so you know when our new videos drop, including our weekly NASCAR fantasy picks. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week, and we will meet back same time next week and go over all the action from Atlanta Motor Speedway.